Hello and welcome to the second part of lesson 1. I beg your pardon, this is part 3, lesson 1, the second part of lesson 1 for part 3, assessor qualifications. And the referencing a link is when you open this material at the very beginning, it tells you what part of the lesson you are on. So we use the numbering of part 1, part 2, part 3, etc. because it's easier to follow up. There's so many lessons, right? This is part 3, lesson 1, the second lesson. So on the DVD it must read part 3, lesson 1b. Now, I just want us to do a very quick recap as you're on this course as a prospective assessor. In the last session, we looked at a number of aspects as reflected in the objectives, which I'm going to go through very quickly. And I trust that you are using the resource as a supportive provision to you. We began with the objectives to identify and explain the principles and requirements of assessment. And today's lesson will seek to cover this part of the objective. Some of the aspects were covered in the previous lesson. The previous lesson, as a matter of fact, did look at to identify and describe the different types of assessment methods and various assessment types. We looked at, in the previous lesson, in particular, the assessment types. We covered various assessment types. We covered these ones: diagnostic, formative, and summative, and we used the term called initial assessment for diagnostic. So we have covered those aspects thoroughly well, and I believe that by now you have a clear understanding and a distinction between the three: diagnostic or initial assessment, formative, and summative, and you've got a clear perspective of where we are going. Now, in today's lesson, we'll seek to go and delve into the principles and requirements of assessment. As I said before, the way I'm delivering these sessions is holistic. You find that some aspects of requirements of assessment were already mentioned in the previous session, and we continue still mentioning them like a thread throughout the course, because we have to have this as an underlining factor, this underpinning knowledge that carries throughout the qualification. And I want you to follow this very closely. And also, at some point in time, after you've gone through the whole process, you should be able to demonstrate how to plan an assessment, demonstrate ability to involve learners and others in an assessment process. I'll keep mentioning this because you discover this as a very important factor. Now, let us proceed to the next session, which is lesson 1, part B. This is part B. Like I said, the lesson 1 continues. What are the principles and the practices of assessment? We've covered a little bit of it. Now we're going to go to the next level. The principles, we're going to look at, first of all, the purpose of assessment as a foundation, then assessment methods, then principles and requirements of assessment. This is a kind of diagram we're going to be looking at and the way things are arranged. And now, as we proceed, let's have a clear definition for us to understand the principles and practices of assessment and the requirements. The question I posed before I finished the previous lesson was, why assessment? Maybe at this point in time, you can pause the DVD and write down on a piece of paper what you think are the reasons for assessment. I know you've seen this already, the materials on the board, but pause and reflect back from what you know already, what the purposes of assessment are. Thank you very much. Having done that, let's have a look at the critical areas of assessment. The reasons why, the purpose of assessment: grade the attainment of learners. How would you know that learners on your program, any case study, are actually achieving? Is by using a grading system. How do you do that? You've got write upon assessment, so question, or through continuous assessment process where people bring coursework, you mark it, you feedback. That way you are now grading their performance. And of course, from the previous lesson, we talked about the formative assessment and the summative assessment. At the end of the day, you're going to grade. So you are performing at level 3, or you are performing at entry level, or you are performing at A star level, or B star, as the case might be, or you've passed the qualification. That is a purpose for assessment. And this also helps to raise confidence on the part of the learners, because it's a closure. They began a process, now they've got a grade, and they can take home level. This is what I've achieved. So that also brings in some of the purposes of assessment. They are offshoots. One of the primary reasons is to grade attainment of learners. Another area where assessment is used is the obvious things that help select the best candidate for a job. When you go for a job interview, there's an assessment criteria called the interview checklist. There are certain things they're looking for in a candidate. So when they're interviewing you, they're actually assessing you. So as an assessor, you'll be able to select who you think fits the criteria. Purpose of assessment. Another, which many of you on the course might be attuned to, is judge occupational competence for a learner. Occupational competence simply means you look at a learner, for example, in their workplace, and the workplace has a certain process which every worker in that category follows. So you're going to have that criteria, and you're going to observe the person at work. As you're observing, you're recording notes. Either they're achieving or they're not achieving. So the purpose of assessment is to judge occupational competence. So it's very critical for you to understand why you assess. And another area is to help plan a better teaching strategy and implement equality and diversity. Where do you find this type of assessment? At what stage should you carry out this type of assessment for you to plan a better teaching strategy? Obviously, you've just learned this lesson. Lesson 1, the first part A, talked about initial assessment. So an initial assessment can be put in place so that you can identify certain things and then make a strategy to implement equality and diversity. For if you don't know nothing about the learners, their difficulties, their needs, or their styles, you cannot plan a good lesson. Neither can you plan a good assessment journey. What do we mean here is that when you know that your learners are good at writing, then you can incorporate in your assessment written assessment. When you know that your learners like talking, explaining things, in your assessment plan, you can include a professional discussion as a method of assessment. So this is a purpose of assessment. Initial assessment, the part of assessment that helps you to identify certain elements from the word go. Then we also look at help plan an effective assessment plan. Assessing must also be planned. I've got experience in assessing occupational competence. And when you're assessing occupational competence, you find that learners, they've got varied work patterns. So at initial assessment, you identify how and where things can fit in. What do I mean? For example, if you want to conduct an observation in the workplace for a candidate called B, you must find out when they are available, what time is suitable for them to do the assessment, how would they like to be given feedback, and what kind of environment would they prefer to receive the feedback. Is it straight after the observation in the workplace? Would that be suitable? Would that be fit in the regulation of the company they work for? a wide range of things. And you find out all these parameters. Once you do that from the word go, then you can do an effective assessment plan. And in particular there, you're also going to look at the number of aspects such as what is the most appropriate assessment method. Observation is one of them, because you're going to have to observe him do their work. But during observation, what kind of systems can you use? Are you allowed to take a camera at work and record their performance? Then when you go away from their workplace, you begin to analyze it rather than you taking notepad. If that is ethical and allowed in the workplace, you can do it. If it's not allowed, you won't do it. So scenarios vary. So one of the things that an assessment would address is in preparing an effective assessment plan. And I don't want you to get confused here, because when you're on the assessor's course and you're also assessing other learners for which you'll be graded, you discover that what I tell you is what you're going to do to your assessee, and that's what you're going to tell them. So be aware of the similarity of information, because that's what it is anyway. I'm your assessor, and you an assessor to your candidates, whom I'm observing you assess. Right. Another way, the purpose of assessment, it helps to review the effectiveness of quality assurance. In every industry, in particular colleges that I'm familiar with, we also have EQA, external quality assurance visits from exam boards to whom we subscribe. And we've also got our own internal quality assurance process, which we call standardization. We assess our own performance against a set criteria. A number of people are involved, and we judge whether or not we are doing it right. Then if we're not doing it right in every area, we review, we set a review plan, and how we're going to implement the course of action. The external verifier or external quality assurance, they've got a set criteria, an expectation of every college they accredit, how they should perform. So they come to visit the college and also have an interaction at some point with the candidates to see whether the process of assessment, according to their criteria, is being followed. So all these things constitutes the purpose of assessment. Now, having this in mind, I'd like you, as a matter of an exercise, to write a short summary in very few words as you pause the learning resource, what you think in your context the purpose of assessment is and will be as you're studying this. Pause this, and I'd like you to spend at least half an hour looking at the purpose of assessment in your own context, meaning the candidates you're going to be assessing and in the environment. You can do an imaginary, because I want you to get the concepts, and refer to textbooks which I recommend. On your material that I gave you, there is further reading, and also online there's some materials that you can Google and look at the actual purposes of assessment. I will continue here. I trust that the exercise you undertook had helped you to actually look at the purpose of assessment. Now, with that background in mind, we can now look at the various methods of assessment. And when we talk about methods of assessment, what do we really mean? There is how you're going to assess, the journey, and the method. How you're going to carry out assessment with your learners depends on a number of parameters: the availability, what time they want to, they can be there, what time they can actually get their own assessees in place, agree time with their managers, a lot of things. That is how, that's the process, that's the journey. But now, the actual method you're going to use when you do get to meet. There are a number of methods, what we call this observation and role play. There's written examinations or tests. There's professional discussion. There's examining a work product. There's presentation and questioning. And there's also peer-to-peer assessment. Now, if you look at observation and role play, observation and role play is a method where we have a criteria that we're looking at, and then we let the candidate perform the task. Then you're observing them, how they're performing the task. There are certain benchmarks, which means certain things they have to achieve as a minimum. And if we see them do that and exceed, that's obviously a pass. But if we see that they don't do those minimum requirements in their performance, there is an issue there, which we have to give feedback, and then we seek to have another date to where we can go and do an observation. This is how it works. Sometimes it's good to use role plays as a matter of preparation. I've used role plays quite a lot to prepare candidates for a final observation. A role play will simply involve actors. One candidate acts as A, the other one as B. Especially in the health and social care, we do some role plays as a matter of preparation. We get one candidate to sit in the wheelchair, and the other candidate push the wheelchair. We get one candidate to lie in a bed and demonstrate the movements in manual handling, and so forth. You can do those role plays for preparation. But in a case where role play is allowed as a final assessment method, you can use it. But just counter check with the examination council that you are subscribing to, or the internal developers of the program, if they do allow that. So this will involve observation and activities. Some people that like activities, they do very well in observations because they just want to show that they can do it, while others would prefer to do a written examination. But now, if you see, I've given you a minimum of 6 methods here. 1, 2, 2, 4, 6 methods here. In most cases, 2, 3 different methods of assessment will be sufficient. You understand that? So that's why it's good to do an initial assessment and work out a plan, and also compare notes with the exam council. It's very important, very important. Compare the notes, what they would like to see. But I can tell you that there's equal opportunities. You can have the wide range of choices, but stick to the rules. Written examinations or tests. This is very straightforward. Most of us who have done GCSEs, A-levels, have gone through this. You can actually, even in your case, design a question paper where people write examinations, but under exam conditions. If it's external assessed, you'll be advised by the exam council how that's going to be done. Professional discussion. Very interesting method of assessment, very appropriate for vocational assessment, where you get a candidate, or there could be a number of candidates. They sit down with yourself as a prompter. You carry out a professional discussion following the assessment criteria, following the actual things they need to be talking about, not random materials. If you can see these methods are put across here, they must be used such that they bring out the actual assessment criteria to be met. It's not a discussion which is random. You're talking, you're discussing topics which don't point to the criteria. They will fail. So when you're designing an assessment method, they must always point to meeting of the criteria. Important, important. What about examining a product of work? There are some candidates. There are some candidates for some of you who might be involved in engineering or technology. This is where they produce something, right? And you let them examine, and then they can be telling the decimals how this works. Or you can, by yourself, let them produce something, then you examine that, what they produce against the criteria. If it's technology, the dimensions, are they accurate? Does it fit the health and safety rules? A lot of things. It will be a product that you can touch. For example, if you're going to be asked to produce a book, let me produce a book with certain specifications. It's going to have a black cover. It'll have a string which is a bookmark. It's going to have a title somewhere there. All sorts of things. Now, when that is produced, you must examine it. Has it met the requirement? Are you with me? They will have produced something. In the process, you can also even do the questioning. That's now you combine the questioning with that. You can combine some of these methods. You can do the questioning and presentation, because you're examining the product of work. You must ask them questions now. Or how did you sort of choose? Why did you choose these dimensions? Or they will explain. But remember, when you're doing assessment, you want to prove that these candidates are worthy to be awarded a qualification. So once I produce, you examine it. Also, why it missed the criteria? Why don't you qualify it with some bit of questioning? So you can choose different types of methods. Peer-to-peer assessment methods. They're being used in several instances. In my IT projects, I used to use peer-to-peer observations, peer-to-peer assessment, whereby I get the fellow candidate to examine another candidate. They swap a piece of work, then they examine it, then they pass their decisions on it. Oh, I think this is A, it must be supposed to be B, etc. That way, they can quality check each other. You understand that one? Or in role play, it's also about peer-to-peer. You get fellow candidates to examine or mark other candidates' work with an assessment criteria which you provide. You're going to have to use a guideline. The idea of all these types of assessment methods is to bring out the competent person in that candidate, the competence in that candidate. Can they do things? Can they show skill and knowledge and understanding? So as a final way to make a decision, you must have taken your candidates through 2 or more of these assessment methods. And the process will have had a number of chances, if you're doing a formative assessment, feedback to them to improve. But one of these methods, 2 or 3 of these methods will have been used. Now, as a matter of a test, I want you to just do a short reflection, pause the video. In your past life or your current life, which of these methods have you been assessed? If about the qualification in the last 12 months or 24 months or the last 3 years, which of these methods, or if not listed, was used for you to achieve that qualification? Let me continue to the next session, which is I beg your pardon, I've just paused over there. I think I've added extra pages by mistake. What I will do, I'll go back to the slide and I'll just click on the right page. Now, as principles and requirements of assessment will be our next session. And before I continue this, I'd like us, first of all, to take a little break and continue with this section. Thank you very much. For any questions, you know where to go. Ring us. Just go on the website as it appears on the screen or on your documents or on your Moodle account, the online learning account. Go and chat with your tutor there. You'll be provided with the necessary information. Thank you very much, and God bless you.